Hi, I'm Peter, and welcome to my podcast, Waking from the Fire. I have Virginia Kelly with me, who is an acupuncturist and a therapist. I'm going to let her introduce herself because her background is just so fascinating. Today, we're going to talk about something that is so prevalent, important, and extremely helpful. You're going to walk away from this podcast with strategies to start improving your life immediately. We promise you that. So without further ado, Virginia, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Peter. I'm a certified psychotherapist, licensed acupuncturist, and I define myself as an energy healer and holistic coach because I take from different aspects of life, mysticism, and whatnot. And I like to treat the person as an integral system of body, mind, spirit.
Thank you. I love that. And that's why we're talking today. Because there's a place for medicine and there's also a place for holistic, complementary, looking at our entire world to help us heal, to use every resource possible. And that's what we're going to do today. So like I said, we're going to talk about depression and anxiety. And I want to give you a real brief background. You might know me, you, the viewer and listener. You might know my past. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. My father was an abusive, addicted, sick individual. I have a lot of empathy for him now. And my brother, sister, and I, and my mother, we all survived, thank God. And we're all decent human beings and living good lives, trying to contribute. But my entire life, since my childhood, I walked around with something wrong, something not feeling right. But I powered through it. I became a perfectionist. I didn't know what this was at the time. And I overcame whatever obstacle was in front of me. I overcame. I tried to do my best. And I achieved a certain level of success. But when I turned 48 years old, I couldn't deny this feeling anymore, like an empty hole that I didn't know was there, that I was continually trying to feel. And so I found a good therapist. And he referred me to a 12-step program that was appropriate for me. And what I found was I wasn't depressed per se. And Virginia, you're going to describe what depression actually is. We talked a little bit about this, so fascinating. But I was experiencing something called unexpressed grief that can masquerade as depression. I also experience, as do my children and most of my audience and clients and patients, anxiety. So, Virginia, why don't we start with a definition, whatever you want to tell us about what depression actually is?
Well, I want to start by saying what is not. Like
Fine.
grief might sound and feel depressing, but it's not necessarily depression. Is sometimes the symptom is a healthy response to an unhealthy environment or stimuli, an appropriate affect. So depression is this very casual term thrown around to describe pretty much low energy. And yes, I bridge from Western psychotherapy to Eastern medicine, because if we look in the continuum of depression towards anxiety, and there's a whole spectrum in between, we can take it as a deficiency and as an excess of energy. Okay, so another thing that, for example, it happens very often, people throw around the term bipolar, which is the new term for manic depressive. But unless you have actual episodes of mania and depression, you're not bipolar. You might be a little bit unstable, cyclical, lunatic, if anything, but not necessarily bipolar, right? So a lot of people that come to me with so-called depression, they're really experiencing states of anguish because something that happened in their life that triggered this, either early childhood trauma or something recent. There's an uptake of cases, if anything, since the pandemic, because everybody is grieving the life that once was, that now it kind of became clear that it's gone.
Yeah, right.
There's a new normal, whatever that means, because what is normal basically is the norm, and what is the norm is the majority. And oddly enough, if we go to US statistics alone, most people are experiencing some form of anxiety and depression. And those are terms that are very trending. And they are broad terms that are the most recognized even by insurance coding, but that's another kind of worms. And basically, the way I see anxiety and depression is a lot of times one triggers the other. There's a lot of people that they are anxious not to be depressed. So almost anxiety acts as a defense mechanism against depression, and the other way around, because if you want to repress the anxiety, what you repress, you depress. And for example, cases of anger really are, or a lot of cases of depression or anger turns inwards that people repress and they don't express. Now, what you want is healthy avenues to express that anger. You want rather buy a punching ball than punching someone, right?
Sure.
So with the term anxiety and depression, there's a lot of grief. Even grief in itself, it has 5 stages that they touch upon anxiety and depression. So a lot of depression really looks more like an apathy, because it's lack of energy. So it's a deficiency. So one of the good ways to target that is to get the patient out of that is actually tap into the unexpressed, repressed, depressed anger. Okay. So I have
can I
sure
keep that thought, because you said so many good things and I just want to flesh them out a little bit for the viewer and listener. I heard a couple of things. One is careful of labels, right? People are throwing around labels. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I have PTSD. I hear my children and their friends just throw it around like they could be hanging out on Friday night and say, oh God, I have so much PTSD. Like, these are serious terms. We don't want to self-diagnose or self-label ourselves, because life is already challenging, right? So I heard that. I also I want you, if you don't mind, in a second, tell us about the people that are seeking you out, and what are those symptoms that may or may not be depression? Why are they seeking your help? But before that, talk really quickly about repression can lead to depression. Like, what is repression?
Well, basically, repression is a defense mechanism. There are many, and repression is just one of them. So, Freud, who was the father of psychoanalysis, and I would like later on to go into a little bit into Freud, because he was a great misunderstood body-mind healer, really. Right. And he said we're all repressed psychopaths. So thank God we're repressed.
Hey, at least it's not just me or you, it's all of us.
Who haven't killed someone in their mind, right?
That is true. That is true.
So the reptilian brain wants to act as an animal, but thank God we have a frontal cortex that knows better, right?
Yeah, thank God. So would you say, so I grew up in this abusive home. There was trauma, and there was things that kids shouldn't experience. I realize that now. Would you say that my brother, sister, well, we'll talk about myself. Could I have repressed a lot of what I saw, a lot of what I felt, and then just plowed through life? And then you said what you repress, we depress. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, when you are in a kind of life death situation or a survival system, and life death situations sometimes are interpreted as a one-time thing, but when it's pervasive and persistent in the home, where you don't have a safe place, that gets very ingrained. And we have the disown parts of the self and the acquired parts of the self. So basically, we are trained to be in a way or another that is convenient for our parents, so to be, or convenient for our survival in a case like that. So, for example, typical example, parents that fight a lot. and they have kids that they don't want to hear the fight. What they're going to develop? Ear infections. Okay. So suddenly the parents is like, let's see at the secondary gains. A, parents stop fighting. Mission accomplished. 2, oh, now you get their attention. Maybe they're fighting to attend you. Secondary gain. 3rd, you don't go to school. Maybe you get an extra candy, and that person is going to develop psychosomatic conditions or chronic conditions because it's an MO that served when they were young. Now, what they fail to realize, because it's an unconscious mechanism, is that when they're old, those conditions are no longer serving them because it doesn't help them not to go to work. It probably doesn't help them with their spouse. So
yeah, how does that manifest then? Like, what would that look like for me today?
Well, you're not my patient, so I'm not going to analyze you. But
you can, but okay.
But basically, because everybody can have a different manifestation of it, and it's very personal. You asked me about my patients. My patients, I have all different sorts of condition, and but for example, I want to bring about a case that will exemplify what I was saying before about anger and depression. So this patient decided she was having some suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation, right?
Right.
And
there's a difference, right? There's a difference. Just
the difference it's more of a fantasy. The thought is more like you're planning on it. I mean, I don't want to categorize it too much because from the fantasy to the thought, it depends on the case. Is a long way or is a short way, right? Yeah. So what happened, and I'm just gonna give this example because it's very telling. So she's having suicidal thoughts, and she texts. She doesn't call. She texts the suicidal hotline. And she got very upset. So she didn't call me, first of all, okay? And second, she didn't even call the hotline. She texted. So what happens is that when you text, apparently I didn't know, and I thought this was brilliant, the first thing she gets is kind of like a disclaimer that she has to read and sign and whatnot. And that really pisses her off because she's like, oh my God, I'm thinking of taking my life and I have to read a disclaimer. And so she snapped out of it. And when she was telling me, I couldn't stop laughing. And I thought it was brilliant. And I'm like, hello, you have me. How come you didn't call me? Oh, it was Sunday. I mean, if we don't have a schedule on Sunday, but if there is an emergency, you can always call me and or check to see if I'm available. Oh, but I'm on a tight budget. Oh, I see how much you value your life, right?
Yeah, right.
And
so
forget about me. Forget about me. Let's go back to the hotline. You couldn't be bothered to call if you're actually having suicidal thoughts. You had to text. I thought that they need to protect themselves too. So their disclaimer, whatever she had to sign, I thought it was a brilliant idea to snap her out of that state because she could tap into her anger. And anger now is an excess of energy, not a deficiency of energy. And I don't know if they think of this in this way. This is the way I'm thinking because I have the Eastern medicine background. But what is easier to disperse an excess or to tonify a deficiency? It's always easier to disperse an excess. So one of the techniques, if you will, is to tap into the patient's anger because it's a reservoir of energy. And that now we're going from the continuum more into the anxiety part, into the excess of energy. And that's why overall, I rather deal with anxiety than with depression because I have more energy to work with.
What are you talking about you personally, if you were experiencing depression or anxiety, or your patient?
Both. Okay. It's always easier to work with excess of energy than with deficiency.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there's many people that could benefit because we're so many of us are experiencing anxiety. But I want to tie in why we're having this conversation to someone that's listening and say, well, I'm not suicidal and I don't know that I'm depressed. What I've experienced over 30 years, and especially these last 6 years, as I have done some of this work and the self-reflection, is every person I meet that I have an authentic conversation will, if they're aware of it, will admit some of these thoughts. You know what? I've fantasized what would it be like to be dead. My father committed suicide when I was 16, and he did it in a very public way. And it's something that I didn't think about for many, many years. And then I had children, and I would think I could never do this to my children. Now,
It's a very selfish act.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it
And
shows how
and
much
this is
how hurt he was, how much pain he was in to think that that was the best solution too.
well, okay, there's a couple of things here. Yes, this is not to wrong anyone who went down that road, because you don't really know what's in their mind. One of the red flags is, I don't want to kill myself. I just want the pain to stop, because the pain is so unbearable that they would go to any extent to stop it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you witness in addiction, where parents do terrible things because the brain starts interpreting the substance as essential for life. So what happens is, someone who does something terrible to prioritize their drug is because their brain is acting on survival mode. They need that drug to survive in their brain.
Yeah, I understand. So my father. So I never thought about suicide, but I thought, what would it be like to be dead? If I was dead, no one would bother me about my bills. I wouldn't have to pay my mortgage. I could just get a break. And when I share that with people, friends or clients, life coaching clients, some will share the same back to me. So what I'm saying is, the reason why I think this is so important is, there's so many of us trying to do good things. We're trying to eat healthier. We're trying to exercise. We're trying to be more present for our children, for our families. We're trying to be better partners, but something is holding us back. So I think it's important for us to talk about these things that people are experiencing, that you, the listener, the viewer, may or may not be in tune with. And I'm not putting this on you, but you might be experiencing something like me, that, hey, there's something wrong, I don't know what it is. And listening to this podcast, finding a good therapist can maybe help you tap into, here is what's wrong. Maybe I'm just anxious. Maybe I am depressed. Maybe it's unexpressed grief. And seeing someone like you, Virginia, you could help a person connect to that, I assume, like my therapist did. Is that correct?
Yes, therapy is essential for anyone who doesn't feel quite right, even though those not always know how to pinpoint it. Like they cannot always put the finger on it, because a lot of issues are unconscious or pre-verbal, things that happen when we didn't have the tools to deal with it. So what happens is that, we grow with that. And then once we are grown-ups, we can deal with that. And life is a great opportunity to deal with that, because anyone who presses your buttons, anyone who triggers you, is opening a portal for you to go down that rabbit hole. But it's scary.
Mm-hmm. Right, but I see it. I hear what you're saying is also an opportunity to heal. Like, hey, what's really going on? Like, it might not feel good. It might feel bad. It might feel scary. But with that comes an opportunity to say, I don't like this feeling anymore, and I want to do something about it. I want to work with someone like Virginia, or find a therapist, or use some of the resources you're going to share with us. Can you talk about, so we talked a little bit about depression. Can we talk a little bit about anxiety, what that is exactly? I did a podcast with a psychotherapist in the past, and she differentiated by saying stress is external and anxiety is internal. What's your definition of anxiety?
Stress is an appropriate affect. And what do I mean by appropriate affect? There's a stimulus and a response, right? While anxiety is more of a symptom. So it's a symptom of what? What's going on that is triggering this anxiety, right? So the thing is that there are different reasons for anxiety, and everyone has their own reason, and everybody knows pain. That is like common to the human condition. And something that we do is defend against it because it's for self-preservation. And some defenses are useful, and some defenses, then they are obsolete after a while. They are useful at a time, and then they no longer serve us. So it's like, but you are familiar with an MO, with a way of functioning, so you have to re-educate yourself, which is not easy, to a new way. And one of the tools, as you mentioned, the 12-step program, basically is build new neurological pathways in your brain, because the brain is there's the field of neuroplasticity that talks about this. The brain can adapt, and it's like a muscle that you can work. So basically, whenever you have a self-destructive behavior that might be triggered by anxiety or whatever else, and you want to eliminate that behavior, it's better to replace that behavior. And you have to start by counting days. I even treat couples therapies as if it is an addiction, because when we are emotional, there are different neurochemicals inside our body that do different things for us. For example, they have done studies where a man and a woman fight. What are their physiological responses? While the woman is venting and getting the issues out of the tissues, which is in line of Eastern medicine, we need to get the issues out of the tissues.
I like that.
And then I'm going to develop a little bit about this. The man felt more threatened. Why? Because it gets triggered the fight or flight. So unless he physically fights or he physically flies, then he goes into the freeze. Yeah. If he cannot fight or flight, he freezes, right? So it was more detrimental for the man than for the woman, for example. So when I have couples fighting, and one of the reasons they fight is because their own unresolved trauma, and usually from childhood. And the reason why we choose each other is not for the good things that we think that we choose each other. We choose each other more of an unconscious level because we feel familiar. And usually that familiarity has to do with modus operandi that they were in our home, that we grew up, right, that are not resolved. So it goes and triggers the same places. So and Hendrix Harville wrote a wonderful book that is called Getting the Love You Want, and is about imagotherapy, and it's also based on the work of Freud, where basically the parents are an example to follow or to avoid, and the same the partners that we choose. So we might choose a partner that might have some traits of some of our parents, or exactly the mirror opposite. Okay, so instead of let's say you had an absent parent who was a very good person, either you choose someone who's absent and good, or present and bad. So the idea is to outgrow these patterns, because going back to the term PTSD that everybody throws around, Freud talked about repetition, how repetition makes master. So, and that's the principle of PTSD. We tend to repeat patterns. So when there is family trauma, ideally you want to interrupt the cycle of damage, not to perpetuate it and pass it along the next generations, right? So usually the people who interrupt the cycle of drama is or trauma is the people who seek therapy, seek help, or don't reproduce, not to pass it along. And they might not even be a conscious decision. It may even be an unconscious decision, right?
Yeah. That was me. I felt this pain, and I chose to stop it. Once I found out it was generational, I said, I'm not going to pass this on to my children. Even though I passed on things I didn't know subconsciously to them. I never beat my children or berated them or cursed at them, but I withheld love. I abandoned them. By if they displeased me, I withheld my love, and that hurts a child just as much. But I hear what you're saying. I also want to say one other thing, because I don't want someone listening to this saying, "Oh my God, I chose my partner because of It reminded me of my crazy childhood, or someone in my family, a mother or father, that was abusive or addicted or acted a certain way. For a couple, Virginia, that realizes this now, hey, we attracted each other, maybe some of the negative, but there's qualities about each other that we love. Is there hope for that couple?
Not only is hope, that is the opportunity. We choose our own opportunities, and triggers are opportunities.
Yeah, good point. So always, what I'm hearing you saying too is something Frank, my therapist, always said to me. There's always another way to look at something. So I could be triggered. What the scenario you played out, where you're sitting in therapy and you're a couple, the mother of my children, I hate the term ex-wife, the mother of my children and I tried for many, many years and went to couples therapy. And there was, I felt that exact scenario where she loved it. She got to express herself, say how she felt in a safe environment. And I was sitting there saying, I have to jump out of this window right
I want
now.
to break the room.
Yeah, I'm going to go crazy, but I sat there calm and quiet because I'm a perfectionist. I don't want to see anyone. At the time, I didn't want to see anyone see me upset. So I get that completely. I'm not sure why I brought that up, but I just wanted to relate that if you feel like jumping out of a moving car when your partner is talking, expressing themselves, you're not alone and there's nothing wrong with you. Oh, here's what I wanted to say. And then it's an opportunity. That trigger you said, Virginia, that if it's anger, if it's a strange feeling, whatever that trigger manifests as, you could look at that and say, boy, do I hate that person for doing that to me? Or I want to look at this and heal this because I don't like the way this feels. Is that what you're saying?
It's your trigger. It's your trigger. So you might
Yeah.
as well take care of it, right?
Yeah. Otherwise you'll just keep getting the trigger, right?
If it was not your trigger, you could not be affected by it.
Oh,
there
that's
would
a
be
great
no
point.
cathexis, no energy attached to it.
Oh, I see. So
No anchor.
if someone does something, let's just say it's, I don't know, it's harmful or it's selfish or it's dangerous, and we don't react to it, it's because we're not triggered to it. It's not us. We're not owning that. But if someone says something or does something and I say, how dare you, or what a jerk, or then that's something within me that's triggered.
Yes. I remember, I'm going to put a very stupid example, but this is going to clarify things for people. I remember I had a roommate that she had some, nowadays there's a lot of prejudice, so she had her own ideas about Catholicism. And I was kind of brought up Catholic, but not really. My family wasn't really religious. I mean, I'm Maria Virginia after Virgin Mary. And it feels like the biggest joke, but that's another story. Anyway, one of the ways that she had to insult me or offend me, like Catholic. And I was like, that's like if you call me red hair, nothing wrong with red hairs, and I don't even have red hair. So for me, it was like, I couldn't relate to the insult. It was actually funny. I'm like, first, learn how to insult. So then we can fight, right?
Yeah, right. So you could trigger me, right? Good point.
Correct. Yeah, there was no trigger there.
Funny what you said, Virginia. We're all related, right? We meet for a reason. The name Virginia is after the Virgin Mary. It could be, right? My Greek name is Panayotis, which is the masculine. It's the masculine version of the Virgin Mary in Greek.
Oh,
so we're connected that way too.
Okay.
We're both named after the Virgin.
Very interesting.
I know. So
very interesting.
I know. So you said something before that I love. Getting the issues out of the tissues. What does that mean, and why is it important?
Well, we this goes to the field of psychosomatics, right? There are things that we express, and we express them verbally, we express them physically, we can express them by sublimating them. That's the highest form of defense, like art, for example. Or because they're unconscious, we don't express them. So what happens is our body take it upon itself to do so. And it's going to manifest in a headache. It's going to manifest in body aches, you name it. Okay. So now I have to go a little bit back to the work of Wilhelm Reich, who was a disciple of Freud. And people have this idea that Freud was that is obsolete, and that he was very fixed in his place. And Freud was the father of psychoanalysis. And I'm a former dancer, so I compare Freud to ballet, to classical dance. You can dance the tango, you can dance the cha-cha, you can dance whatever you want, but there's a basis, okay? So that was Freud. Freud, contrary to popular belief, he was not secular. He was married to the daughter of a rabbi, and he was very spiritual. Some will sustain that his whole libido theory was based on the tree of life and foundation, and I think it's called Chasset. Don't quote me on it. I don't know. I will have to look into it. But basically, the importance of Freud in the field of psychoanalysis, first of all, he was a neurologist. He knew the body inside out. And at the time, because of what was going on, he didn't have much of a choice. He had to work in whatever he could find work. He had 5 mouths to feed. And they sent him to do psychotherapy, which at the time was a little bit like hocus pocus. Now, this is a physician, a man of science, and he's the one who started talking about the libido theory. And now the libido could be measured in the Geiger counter. So his importance in the field of psychotherapy is that for the first time in history, he makes the mind scientific. Okay. And now he had his followers and his detractors like everybody else. And more than his detractors, his followers actually were the ones who limit him the most, because now that he was sticking his head out, so to speak, he had to stay with what he started. He couldn't divert from there. And then he has all these disciples, from Carl Jung talking about the collective unconscious and looking into astrology and tarot, which I do, and Wilhelm Reich, that is the one who developed the discipline called organ therapy, that is based on organ energy and orgasm, that is basically Kundalini energy, that is life force. And he also was a man of science, a physician, and he was talking about organ energy, not just in the human beings, but also cosmic energy. At the time, he even dealt with Einstein. He developed the Cloudbuster, which was a machine that could reproduce rain. So when they say they don't have capabilities for weather manipulation, they had them for a long time by now. And Wilhelm Reich, of course, ended up dying in jail because he was kind of like a Tesla, a lesser known Tesla, so to speak. And he was in everybody's blacklist, from the communists to the Nazis. So he was into something. He was the one who coined the term sexual revolution, because he was interested of guiding younger people and helping them with contraceptives of whatever they needed in order to have a healthier sexual life. And anyway, Wilhelm Reich for me is the missing link between Western psychotherapy and Eastern medicine, because he talks about the energy. Wilhelm Reich most people are not familiar with organ energy, but most people are familiar with bioenergetics by Alexander Lowen. Alexander Lowen was a patient of Wilhelm Reich. And they defamated Wilhelm Reich, and they threw a lot of things at him. He was studying the properties of the materials. He was developing organ boxes. He was treating disease as a deficiency of energy. So putting people in these boxes that would gather cosmic energy, and they would cure from cancer. So imagine how
Is he the one where you got the issues out of the tissues from?
Well, the issues out of the tissues, I think it's an expression that I came across in acupuncture school. But yes, basically that's it. He was talking about body yammering patterns. And in Tri-State College of Acupuncture, we were working with trigger point acupuncture, or dry needling technique, that is basically treating those those trigger points in the body that are a manifestation of psychological processes that we are not able to express, so our body takes it upon itself to do so.
Yeah. Like
And
what? Like what, Virginia? Can you give us
like
an example?
like you're trying to protect yourself, so
Okay.
you do the turtle head where
Uh,
you try to put the head
yeah, right. You literally,
yeah, under your shoulder, and then you're going to develop trigger points on the point GB21, for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
And it had happened to me in the past that I'm releasing a trigger point and I'm disarmoring someone, and this person breaks down and they start telling me how they were raped, for example.
yeah.
So
It's incredible. Seemingly unrelated, but you know what was going on. That's why I love Virginia. That's why I love Eastern and Western medicine both, because Eastern explains so much of why some of the things we might do. I was trained in Western as a physical therapist. And learning about Eastern medicine is so fascinating to me because it goes deeper, it goes to the core, which I feel like makes the most sense. If I give someone a diet, as a nutritionist, I know if you eat this way, you'll look and feel absolutely amazing. You'll achieve your ideal weight. But I know there's something else deeper that might stop that person from following that. And Eastern medicine opens the door to let me say, what else is going on for this person?
well, even if they follow your diet, if the person defend themselves against sexual abuse, they might hold on to weight because that's a barrier between the self and the other.
So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I had a client years ago who grew up in a rural area, I'll say, where it was very, very poor and depressed. She happened to be very smart. All of her friends, not all of them, but the majority of the females she knew, 16, 17, 18 years old, they got pregnant in high school, stayed in the town, never left, never went to college, and perpetuated a life similar to their own parents. She didn't want that. She was very bright. She wanted to get out. She wanted to go to New York City. And years later, she realized she became fat to protect herself from anyone sleeping with her so she wouldn't get pregnant, so she wouldn't stay stuck in her small town. And when I heard that, first of all, it broke my heart. And second of all, it made me think, oh my God, there's so much more going on than people just can't get themselves to eat healthy and exercise. So thanks for bringing that up.
But even if you do eat healthy and exercise, if there is an unconscious defense mechanism, like underlying human motivations and conscious mechanisms that make your body hold on to the fat, not letting go, and taking it a step further, if you look into astrology, there are aspects who are actually going to help you either lose weight or the opposite. So, and sometimes it's out of your control. So this is not to say that there's nothing you can do about it. Of course, there's plenty people. I like to empower people and let them know that there's a lot they can do about it. But looking into what are the underlying issues that might contribute to one thing or another, it gives them tools then to be able to address the depression, the anxiety, whatever is going on.
Right, because I appreciate that. And that's why it's important to work with someone like you, to work as an acupuncturist, as a psychotherapist, me as a nutritionist, as an exercise science, as someone that studied motivation and psychology in my own regard, and other tools and resources, to use as many of these resources as possible. Because most of the time, what I've observed, Virginia, and you probably observed this too, and I think you've said it, is people don't know what exactly is going on. They might come to you, so let's say as an acupuncturist, because they have back pain, but it could be so much literally deeper than that. People come to me to lose weight because they can't get motivated. And then I start exploring with them. People start telling me about their childhood and about when they were bad, they were given certain food or not given certain food. And that's an opportunity to say, you know what, a therapist might be a great idea. I think a therapist is a great idea for everyone. I think we should all have a therapist, an advocate, someone on our side, someone on our team. That's how I think of my
now you're
therapist.
thinking like an Argentinian.
Oh, really?
They say that in Argentina, 1 in every 10 people are therapists, and the other 9 go to them.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, then I relate to that because I could not have figured out my own, apparent depression, grief, anxiety without a professional who was on my side, literally on my side, that I could say anything to Frank, and I know he would never judge me, and he would direct me. He wouldn't tell me what to do. He would just direct me in the right path. And
Yes, because the idea is to assist someone in the process of self-healing.
yeah, that's beautiful. So why is it important? So there's issues in the tissues, right? We repress, we hold in, we don't express anger, maybe. Why is it important to get that out? How does that manifest? You mentioned cancer before. Is that related to it?
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, cancer is, in a way, is an unexpressed emotion. Is that you cannot name.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if you think about it, it's a process of self-destruction.
Yeah.
And technically, we all have cancers in our bodies. Our immunological system is all the time clearing those cells, and that's why it's good fasting and whatnot. But what happens that it makes the cancer overcome the immunological system?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much we can talk about that. It's so important to talk about. Maybe we'll do a part 2 podcast just talking about the importance of the immune system and supporting it, and not developing cancer or diabetes or heart disease or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or all these autoimmune diseases that we now know are not genetic. The majority of them, like cancer, I think is, I don't know what research you've read, but I think I've read that cancers are 5% genetic and 95% we have unexpressed cancer genes, and whether we express them depends on our lifestyle, the way we live our lives, the stress that we have, how we eat, how we exercise, who we surround ourselves with, etc. Have you read that similar research?
Well, my brother is a cancer survivor, and I work in the, I did an externship in the Presbyterian Hospital, and it was part of a Columbia study in the part of pediatrics oncology. And there were things that they were mind-blowing, both for better and for worse. Mm. And I came across this girl who had leukemia, and is one of the factors could be hereditary, and you would assume that that was her case because both her father and her mother had leukemia, and yet the type of leukemia that they had was unrelated. So that's when you have to suspect something environmental or something else, because it's like, what are the chances, if this is not hereditary, then what's going on here? But yeah, that was such a learning experience. And I was doing that externship at the time that my brother was also going through cancer treatment.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was very intense. Yeah.
I'm sure. So out of respect for time, because we are running out of time, is there anything you want to share as far as resources? We talked about acupuncture. We talked about psychotherapy. You could certainly talk about those again, that someone can use if they are depressed, if they are, you said, apathetic, if they are.
I want to share a freebie, and this is that anybody can do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people go to bed watching the news and whatnot, and they spiral down. And even if you're watching a great show like Homeland, like I remember I was recuperating from surgery and dreaming that I was working for the CIA, so I was waking up exhausted in the morning. So one thing that I want to recommend is comedies. It's free. You probably have some kind of subscription somewhere, because a minute of laughter is worth 10 grand in biochemicals should you buy them from a lab. Wow. So there you have a free pharmacy. The great outdoors and nature is a free pharmacy. You have to know about it though. Mm-hmm. And you have a pharmacy inside. So when they say you have everything inside, look at that. A minute of laughter, 10 grand. Yeah,
I love that. That's awesome. So I will put information when I post this podcast on how people can get in touch with you. Virginia, any last words you want to leave us with?
VirginiaKelly.com is as simple as that.
That's very simple. VirginiaKelly.com. Virginia, thank you so much for this conversation. We'll definitely do it again because there's so much to talk about. And I made so many notes here and we just didn't have time to get to it. But I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And to you listening, watching, this is Waking from the Fire. Stay tuned for our next podcast. I don't know what it's going to be on, but I promise you it's going to be something to make our lives better. Until next time, I'm Peter.